everybody, and welcome to a Charles Faram catch-up. Today we're with the guys down in New Zealand. They very kindly agreed to join us at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, 8:30 p.m. here in Worcestershire. So good to see you both, George and Brent. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, everyone.
And, perhaps you could just introduce yourself and just say who you are and what you do, so we've got an idea of what who we're talking to and what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, sure. I'm George, sales manager here at New Zealand Hops.
George,
that's it. I'm a bit ill, so I'm trying to do as little talking as I can. But yeah, no, I manage sales globally. So outside of America, where we have a dedicated sales manager, I manage sales for New Zealand, Australia, helping support you guys in the UK, and then the rest of the world in Asia and different places. So yeah, that's pretty much what I get up to.
Fantastic. Thanks for expanding that out, George. I appreciate that. What about you, Brent?
Yeah, I'm Brent McGlashen from our company's Mac Hops. We're one of the largest suppliers to New Zealand hops. We're I'm a fifth generation grower now, so I've been around the sticks for a while and seen the markets good and bad and ugly and fantastic. So yeah, no, we enjoy the ride and we're still here. So yeah.
Fantastic. So I know, George, you're both at the moment in the office in Blackburn Road. Is that right?
Yeah. Based in Nelson. Yeah.
And so where in relation to Nelson is the farm, Brent?
We've got two farms. We've got our home farm, which we've been on since I think like 1907 or something like that, a bloody long time ago. And that's a 30-hectare block, which we also have a joint venture too with our next door neighbours, which is a local iwi group called Colin Horticulture. They grow 25 hectares as well. So we have two bruff machines there that hum away during harvest time. They've been retrofitted a little bit. And then we've got our new farm, which we started 5 years ago, which is about 85 hectares now, and that's in the Mootri Valley. So it gives us, the idea of focusing on that gives us 2 or 3 different soil types that we can change different varieties around that we know excel in those certain soil types, which give us, maximise our oils, aromas, harvest windows, everything. So yeah, it's turned into quite a big operation now.
Fantastic.
And yeah,
it's interesting, actually. I was going to say the stuff that Brent's been doing, because of the fact that he has multiple farms, has sort of led other growers who have also now got multiple blocks or multiple bits of land to start doing the same thing. So it's interesting to watch the transition of varieties into different parts of Nelson. So
you might call me crazy, Paul, but I was on the digger last night and all yesterday and the day before, we're actually pulling out some Nelson Sovereign. Now that sounds like sacrilege to people, but on our home farm, it doesn't grow as well as what it should do, but then on our Mootri farm, it excels. So as a farmer, you've got to make those decisions. It's been a tough one. It's been 2 or 3 years in the making. But by removing Nelson Sovereign out of our block that we've got it at home, it also will take a bit of the mite content out of it. It's our last block that we really have spent a lot of money on putting predator mites in and things trying to fight the mites. So if we remove that, hopefully all of a sudden our farm becomes less challenging over the summer period if we get those spikes in temperatures.
So are you putting different varieties back at home farm, or are you coming out of the hops? So there's a variety that will grow in those conditions better.
Yeah. So we'll be putting in some nectar on there, and also one of the older varieties, Dr. Rudy, will be replacing that. Not for the fact that Dr. Rudy's got it's got a very stable market, but it's because the following year we'll be pulling it back out because we've got an area there that's 22 years old. So we're finding that our hop plants we would like to have a 20-year rotation at the top end, because after that the viability sort of it
kind of levels off, doesn't it?
It levels off, and it doesn't handle the fluctuations that we're having in these different weather events that we have. You think, gee whiz, 20 years is a long time, but bloody hell, the years roll by pretty quickly. The guys were just saying, yesterday, man, we'll be struggling in another 6 weeks.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. It is crazy. No, I must admit, it's an interesting point you make about the age of the plants, because the most noticeable sort of thing I saw, it was in Czech Republic with Sarts. and they get to 15 years, and then they pull them out and automatically replace them because their yield just slides straight off at 15 years. So I think you're doing pretty well with 20.
Yeah, and
we've had longer than that as well. I mean, some of the yields haven't dropped for some plants that have been up to 30 and 40 years old, which you think is incredible, really. They're just
Last year we're pulling out 30-year-old plants, and basically they hit a bit of a peak. You know, you get the rise, and then they just sort of just muddle along, and you within about sort of a couple of 100 kilograms a year you can normally get it. But you've got to really look after your soils to maintain a strong plant out that long. And that harbours a better environment for everything to grow in. And then it's these weather fluctuations that all growers are recognising around the world. We're not getting our traditional periods. I'm hoping this year we're in for a bit more of a traditional sort of a winter. We've had probably 8 frosts, reasonable frosts already, which is great. Before June we're barely kicked into full winter. We had
very few last year as well, didn't we?
Pretty much none.
Yeah, it was like one or half of one.
So basically, if we don't get if we don't get the frost or decent amount of frost, you can already kiss away 10 to 15% of your crop, regardless of how it goes, because it just uses up storage in that tank as a hop plant. They slowly tick away over winter when you want them to shut down and go to bed and take it easy for a while. So.
Yeah, vernalization period. Peter Darby always told me that was called the vernalization period, when they plant shut down and wake up again in the spring. It's
you don't want to use all those carbohydrates over.
Such a great student, Paul, aren't you?
I don't miss a trick. I always learn something when I talk to Peter Darby, that's for sure. Interestingly, you mentioned the bruff pickers. The first time I came to New Zealand was in 2007, and we went to Colin Oldham's farm, and the first machine I walked into was a bruff picker, and I was absolutely flabbergasted because the bruff factory is literally 1.5 miles, 2 miles from where I live here, and it's no longer a bruff factory. It's a industrialist, very small industrial park for offices and storage. But to see them in New Zealand was quite a shock. But apparently, quite a lot of those machines came over in the early days.
Yeah, 1963 was when we installed our bruff machine. So the early to mid 60s was the transition period for New Zealand hop farmers. Back then there were between 50 and 60 hop farms, all had hand pickers. You'd have 30, 40, 50, 60 people. And, back early on, one day we had one of our hop gardens fall down, and we had actually the local schools took 2 days off and helped pick our hops. I'd love to see that happen these days.
yeah, that would be an interesting scenario, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the bruff machines were seen as the ones that could handle our big, heavy, hefty kind of bushy hops. So that's why predominantly they were seen as the ones to bring out. Our second machine we mothballed for about 20 years. Dad bought it back from the Guinness farm. It's been there for a while, but we've retrofitted a lot of things behind it. We like the way that the bruffs pick, how that works. And up at the new farm, we've got our 2 wolf picking fronts, but we have, and behind the wolf picking fronts, we have American cleaning gear, and we find that is a very, very good way of picking hops, very cleanly. But yeah, they work very, very well. As long as you keep the maintenance up, those 1963 machines can handle just as much as what one with a new label can. And I think people get quite surprised when brewers come through our machines. They see the bruffs at the front, and they sort of had a wee chip, and they get to the end of the machine, they go, holy smokes, this thing can really hum, can't it?
Yeah. It's interesting as well, because we obviously took on quite a few new growers about 4 years ago now, and they all many of them went for wolf, installed some wolf machines, and day one they're struggling to get their leaf and stalk, percentages on this brand new shiny kit, and Brent's sitting here with some old kit doing a fantastic job. So it's a lot about what at least from what I've learned, is you can't just have a new machine. You've actually got to really understand it and make modifications pretty heavily and pretty quickly.
Yeah. And you mentioned Colin Oldham. Well, he's just completely redone his whole machine there at New Hoplands, and they've still left the bruff picking fronts at the front end. And everything else is brand, wow. Everything else is brand new, shiny behind him, and he's pulled out some incredible results this year. It is really probably at the top end of hop picking in the world, I'd say.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, the Guinness hop farm where your machine came from is about a half a mile from our offices. So it really is quite a strange coincidence that up here and the Guinness farm's right near our office, about 8-9 miles away from where I am now. So yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But good to see you're still getting plenty of use out of them after all this time.
Yeah, there'll be plenty more too, Paul. I can't see them coming out in a hurry.
So a few months ago, we finished the harvest, and how did that go? How was the season this year? Has it been a good season or a difficult season? How do you get on?
Yeah, bit of mixed. I'll let Brent talk about the sort of the singles hail event that we had this season. That was pretty significant. Overall, it was probably about 85-90% of what we had last season. We had an incredible season in 2020. I mean, that crop was. I've only been here 8 years, and it was the best harvest season. Everything sort of fell in line. There were challenges like all seasons, but in terms of the timing of rainfall and other bits and pieces and the high sunshine blocks, it was just fantastic. So we had about a plus 18% yield increase that season, just based on awesome conditions. And then this year, everything was a little bit more muted, less sort of sunshine blocks. Rain fell in the right places, so rain wasn't really a major issue, but then we had a pretty significant hail event on Boxing Day, which really sort of knocked the top off of our pint and took a lot of the surplus we were hoping for out of the crop. And Brent, he'll talk about it in a second, but Brent was one of the farmers affected on 2 farms, unfortunately. So 5 farms in total were crop dusted with hail over a very significant period of time. So I'll probably transfer over to you, but yeah, it was a pretty major loss.
I did see the video.
Yeah.
I think it was you posted, Brent, a video online and walking through the field after it being decimated by hail. That must have been pretty depressing.
Yeah, no, it was, we get scatters of hail every year, but if you can get away with 3 to 5 minutes, but 40 minutes of hail is quite a phenomenon. And in places you're nearly up to a foot of hail lying on the ground. It was quite unreal. And yeah, there was a video that one of the local reporters did, and he actually put his camera down and he said, "You know what, Brent, you know what this reminds me of?" I said, "No, what does it remind you of?" And he said, "This is when I went to Auschwitz." He said, there used to be something amazing growing here, and now it's just been absolutely decimated. Wow. And he said, it just looks, and it was unbelievable. You'll see, if people have seen the photos, it just was absolutely stripped. The year before, that crop was a absolutely stunning Nelson Sodom crop, and it was even shaping up to, we were hoping to be even better this year. But yeah, to be hit over 2 different areas, basically the hailstorm covered about a 50 to 60 kilometre area, and it's probably taken about between 150 and 200 million dollars out of our community, whether all the apples got written off, the kiwi fruit, buildings got collapsed in town. She was quite a phenomenon, really.
Sounds like a big storm.
Yeah, it was pretty significant. And then on the flip side of that, I guess, is why we're a cooperative. We're a group of 27 farms. Brent has 2 of them, and also manages a 3rd, really. And it's whenever you get those significant events that I had 50 million phone calls on the first day we were back in January after the Boxing Day hail event, and everybody was concerned about their crop, but we really didn't come up short in most areas that we needed to supply. So I think Waimea was the only one that was really short this season for most customers. The rest of their hops could be covered by surpluses from other growers. So in terms of significance, it was significant and unfortunate, but you can't really plan for these things. It's not like you can ever, it's never happened in the whole time I've been in Nelson. And we look back further than that, and nobody's ever seen a 40-minute hailstorm of that magnitude. So it's just a freak event you have to get used to.
We don't like those at any time of year, do we, really?
The only saving grace about the whole thing was it made it very easy to calculate what we lost, because what got stripped was gone. It wasn't coming back, and it was pretty easy. There was a couple of blocks that were on the fringes of that event that just bounced back and were fine. But for the most part, the stuff that did get hit in the epicenter were just totally taken out.
So we actually managed to turn some blocks around, which we were really happy about. We really, as soon as that happened, it was like, well, what do you do? Put your head in the sand, or do you get out there and sort it out? So we wanted the plant health to be as best as we could possibly make it. And so there were really only about 3 blocks that we walked away from because they were just too far gone, but we still kept our fertilizer up to them to run them as if they're a normal crop year. They still need their strength for the following year, and they need to shut down with everything. And so you still got those associated costs. You just don't have anything coming back into the system. So yeah, it was just, yeah.
Do you think the plants will recover safely? There won't be any after effects this year?
To be honest with you, Paul, they could even recover even better. They haven't carried a full crop. In times when there was surpluses around the world, people would rest a field for a year that might have been getting a bit tired, and it would come back into line the following season. So that's what we're hoping. We certainly have given them. They shut down with all that they needed. So
I think the other great takeaway for us, Brent's also our only licensed trial grower who manages a lot of our trials, and he's got them all in a single block. And we were busy looking at those trials for the whole aroma and sensory side of things, but a couple of those plants got smashed as well, and the ones that rebounded looked like they'd never been touched, and they're also the ones that are closest to commercialization. So for us, it was a great example of
what we bred for.
No, but it was ridiculous because I came out about a week after the hail. I thought it was a bit rude to just turn up on the day off and go, sorry, mate, But came and Brent said, oh no, it's not as bad as it all looks. We're going to sort some of this out. We've got a plan for this, blah blah blah. And then I come back about 4 or 5 weeks after that, and I looked at the same plant and went, what the hell? It looked like it never been touched. So because I think it was just before some of those laterals had come out, the plant had sort of evaded a heavy parts of that damage, and that gave me confidence, I guess, because we're getting some crazy yields off of some of these advanced trials, and we're looking at them, a little bit slanted, like is that even real? Because of the high volume of them, and to have them rebound like that was a great part of the whole annual process. So yeah, that's great.
I guess those must be later maturing varieties. If they hadn't set the laterals and others had, they must be slightly later.
Yeah, it kind of hit, unfortunately, it hit right at the pocket at the very worst time. You've got those vines that really only have a week left before they start burring, and then you've got those other varieties that are barely over the top of the wire. So that was the challenge at the time. And I had a next door neighbour. I went to turn the irrigation on about 4 or 5 days later, and he said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, isn't your crop stuffed?" I said, "No, you just watch this, buddy." So no, we managed to turn it around pretty quick. Some things not too bad, but So as you said, as George said, that's the beauty of the cooperative. We span over 50, 60 Ks the way the crow flies, sort of things. And in that, we've got several different valleys, and some valleys will be unlucky some years, and other valleys will profit or be better for it. So that's the beauty of coming to a cooperative like this. You've got that spread, and in that spread you've got different soil types, and that different soil types you become a balance of a hop variety. So
and if one farm was affected, you could lose your crop and you might not get your hops. So it's much better to have that spread over a number of farms. Absolutely.
And another thing that happened too, Paul, with the season was we noticed that the sunshine hours were mostly there for us. They were a bit sluggish coming on, but the light intensity itself, we had a lot of grey days, and especially during harvest. So harvest was a very big, it was actually great. There was a lot of communication between growers, and the growers were ringing up going, "Oh man, my Nelson Sovereign's not ready. Have you harvested yours and done this?" It would normally be harvesting by now. And it's like, well, good on you for holding back and waiting until it was ready. I think I counted up, we had something like 18 growing days that were not really growing days because it was just dull. It would probably be a nice day in your part of the world, but it was horrible for us. We need those sunshine hours, especially at the latter part of harvest. So there were people. Harvest windows were quite different this year, and it was great to see people adapting to the results that they were seeing pre-harvesting those crops and going, well, actually, I'm going to wait for another 3 or 4 days because it's not quite ready. And it was only until probably the last 5, 6, 7 days before you'd walk into those paddocks or the fields and you go, wow, the aroma's finally here. Where normally you'd go into those fields 2 to 3 weeks earlier and you could already, get it on the nose. So it took a lot more careful management and a lot of communication, which was brilliant. It worked very well between growers, and that sharing of knowledge just all helps to streamline the product, really.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really good. And what about, obviously we've had this coronavirus crisis. How did that affect your availability of labor or anything else? Did you have any other problems with coronavirus this year?
We managed to scrape by with labour. This year is going to be a bit more of a problem that we've got coming up. We've got in the next, well, at the end of this month, we've got the extended visa holders, you know, the backpackers and the things like that. We're not sure if they're going to get renewed, which would be a real shame for the whole horticultural industry over here. We rely on those guys to fill the gaps in and around our normal casual staff that we have. So yeah, there's a lot of concerns around labour because there's not many people coming into the country. In fact, very much little.
Yeah, we're putting a bit of pressure on the government. Every sector is at the moment to say, look, the simplest solution to this is give everyone a 1-year extension to their visas and carry on. We do want all of the seasonal travellers that we have that help us with these, not just hops, but kiwi fruit and everything else. So yeah, I think the government's been really good up till this point, so I don't see it, you know, I think they'll see the light at the end of the tunnel there.
The funny thing I see, Paul, is you get, you know, English backpackers, German backpackers, American backpackers, you name it, from all around, and you go back to your own country and you'll very rarely see a young English fella or female on the farm, you know, working away, but yet they come to this part of the world as backpackers and they absolutely love it. You know, it's a real shame that it can't be reciprocated, and they go back home and go, do you know what, I'm going to go and do a hop harvest, or I'm going to go and help on the hop farm. And
I think it seems a lot more romantic coming to New Zealand.
Yeah, they're going down to Kent. Yeah.
Yeah, or Herefordshire for that matter. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and the young people that do join into our industry that we do have now, and we're seeing a few more come into the system, that they take hold of the hop growing system and they just really thrive. They, you know, obviously they see what the end product is and they see us getting through to the customer end, and they really want to be a part of it. It's just getting that word out there that it's actually a really neat little industry to work in.
Absolutely.
And it's an industry that in any one day you can be doing several different things on a farm, and the more we can encourage the younger generation that, hey, farming's a real option for you guys. You know, last weekend I went to one of our staff's housewarming. He'd just bought his first house and absolutely over the moon. His family had come to New Zealand as a refugee family, and for him to be buying his own house and when housing prices are at their peak, you know, brilliant, good on him. You can see that the money that they earn, that they do a damn good job earning for us, is going back into their own families. And that's what we like to see as growers too. You know?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I think, you know, it's a great story, isn't it, that people can come and work on farms. I think a lot of people, particularly in the UK, have forgotten about working on farms as potentially as a career, or even as just a stopgap during their university years or something like that. It's a great experience, and you meet lots of different people from all over the world, and you do learn a lot. And they say once you've been scratched by the hop, you can never leave them alone, can you? You're always involved then.
I mean, that's, you know, you hit the nail on the head. The farming systems are really great to be in. You meet a wide variety of people who get on to work in a team, and you'll often find the quiet ones that start off in your season often end up being the ones who are really pulling other people along at the end of the season. So, you know, it's all a great community to be a part of. Really.
There's also a big renaissance into sustainable farming practices. So obviously we've got a lot of dairy and other industries here that are trying to work on that area and improvement, but a lot of them are seeing easier opportunities to create a sustainable future through hop farming. So we were only talking to a Canterbury-based operation the other day around whether or not they've been doing some grower trials for us for the last 2 years. So they've proved they can grow hops down in that place. Don't necessarily get the same exact yields that we would get up here with all of our sunshine, but they proved it can be done on a commercial level. And that their whole interest in transitioning to hops is because of the whole sustainability piece for them. Canterbury has some issues with water and effluent and off-run into rivers, so they're looking at how they can optimize their farms towards more sustainable future. So they're being given that option, and you guys have done some work in that space on the fuel side of things, haven't you?
Yeah, so when we put in our new farm, we realised that the drying of the hops is the most energy use a hop farm has. So we put in a stonking great big wood chip boiler. So we've got a huge amount of forestry in our area. We actually personally own a forest, our family, because we bought our forest about 15 plus years ago. We were using coal as our form of heating, because it's the only form of heating we could really get over and above diesel here in our part of the South Island. So the majority of them were coal boilers. I mean, as soon as you mention coal to people, the rap that it's had over time, unfortunately, the New Zealand coal actually burns very efficiently, and that's why it's exported around the world, because of how well it does actually fire. But anyway, we decided to go for a change. So we've got probably I'd say we do have the biggest wood chip boiler in world hop farming. So it works very, very well. We can utilise local chipped up wood from sawmills, timber mills, offcuts, things like that. They come through chipped up into smaller chips, and then we feed them into the boiler. And then with our coal boiler 2 years ago, we changed it over to a wood pellet fire. So that's basically sawdust. It's packed in tight and put into run through like a pelleting plant as well, and it gets fed into our machine. Now, that all comes with cost. The wood chip, the wood pellet is probably at least 2 to 2.5 times the price of coal, and it's up there sort of with the diesel price. But we're using a product that's going to be sustainable, that we can actually say, and it's completely dropped all of our emissions down towards the ground. So
fantastic. I think that's something we all need to learn from, to be honest with you. That is something that George and I were talking about before we came on air as well, about electric vehicles and where we should be heading with everything. And I think it's admirable that you're investing in a more sustainable future. It's definitely the right way to go.
Yeah, it's a bit of a buzzword, but I think the co-op's really seriously looking at other streams in that space, and not just the wood project. Our Plant and Food Research is looking into textiles option for some of the green materials. So rather than it go to compost, it does make a downside, as it makes a fantastic compost. But there is an opportunity here for us in New Zealand to look at that in the textile space. So there's a lot of plant fibers and protein in those binds, and there's a good couple of options there that you can use. If we're producing around 1,100 metric tons of hops annually, you can just imagine the amount of green material that we could capture and reuse. So we're looking at all those sorts of downstream things as a way of recycling some of that material as well.
And then for on farm, Paul, the compost system for us that hop compost produces is an absolutely stunning compost to put back out on your ground. You get it analysed, and it comes back, you're like, man, this is rocket fuel. So we as a farm have spent many years doing composting, and now we've worked with the New Zealand company who produces a hop compostable twine. So we've matched that with the likes of our normal strings that we're using, and also some coir, and it's now I turned the compost 4 weeks ago, which was about 4 or 5 weeks after harvest, and 85% of our string has disappeared already. So we were aiming for this to break down within 90 to 120 days in our compost, but it's almost completely disintegrated already.
That's fantastic. And no problems during the growing season with weak strings or anything? They were all okay?
No, we've done very well, actually. So the so-called trial area that everyone's had, we had probably about in the region of, may have been 250, 300 hectares were trialled with it, and there's more being ordered for this year. So
I think every grower that we've got sort of waited for that trial to go through naturally before they jumped on, but they're pretty convinced by it. So.
Yeah, it's a more expensive option, but it has its benefits in terms of it. Your compost can be turned over with no string holding it together, and I've spent my time in the American side of composting and things like that too, and we're lucky we have the moisture in our compost over here to really ramp up the heat, especially over winter. You're sort of aiming at getting it up around that sort of 60-degree mark if you can, or 140-degree Fahrenheit. And the longer you can keep it at that heat, the better composting you're making. So there's a whole different, you could make a whole different industry around it. You know, we have a lot of people who just come and pick up for their gardens, and my garden at home personally, our veggie garden at home, I've never put one drop of fertilizer on it. It's just all hot compost, and the fruit's absolutely stunning. We put it in our glass house and we sell organic fruit at our vegetables at our gate, and we have people who just stand there and eat our lettuces off the stall, or they eat the cucumbers or stuff like that, and they're like, how do you guys get the flavor into your vegetables? And I'm just like, well, we don't do anything different. It's all natural. So
no, I did see that image of you squeezing passion fruit on the hops.
Excellent. So that's all great stuff. I mean, and I think there's so much more to learn with the sustainability angle and what we can do going forward as a hop industry. But how about the varieties? What's happening, during lockdown, and what are people doing about their contracts? Are any people rolling forward? Is that working, and how are you controlling sort of volumes? Is that going to be a problem for you coming this year?
Yeah, it's been a challenge, not for us here in New Zealand, because we only locked down for March, the end of March last year when COVID struck. We locked down out of precaution, but there wasn't very many cases. There was sub 50 in New Zealand or whatever at the time, and I think the most it ever got to was 100, and they're all in managed isolation anyway. So
everybody could carry on drinking beer, no problem.
Well, beer sales went up, so obviously there's been a number of craft beer subscriptions start up as a result. Their business is booming because people are just ordering mixed packs of beer and drinking a lot at home. I had a stout last night to try and cure this damn man cold that I have. But yeah, you got to try anything.
If you can sell beer as a cure for cold, you're doing well.
Well, it was a Three Boys Oyster Stout. I thought it must have had some special properties in it. So
there you go.
In terms of our disruption to business, it's been pretty significant. So we're an export business primarily. We supply 15 to 20% into the New Zealand market. We've got a big beer. I think we're third or fourth, for beer drinking in the world. Maybe in that sort of top 5 category. We definitely drink a lot per capita, but we just don't have the population to support all the hops that we grow. So as you know, we export a huge amount to you guys in the UK and into the US and Australia. So for us, the major challenges have been twofold. One is our distributors like yourselves have been heavily impacted. So customers in the UK haven't been able to brew. So naturally those hops have not been sold, and those conversations with the customers about how those contracts are managed have been being had. But it's a very tricky thing on the growing side of things, because naturally you can't really take a gap year from growing hops, although we have. And we've been trying to be proactive on this side of things. The hail in some weird turn of events has helped, because some of that surplus wasn't necessary at this point for the market where it's at. So that's been beneficial in some ways. But at the same time, the challenge has also been global shipping. So getting the hops to brewers via sea freight has been the main challenge. Air freight's readily available, but at a high cost. So it's been a bit of a barrier to sort of getting some new product development done, especially on new hop varieties like Nectaron. Things like that have been a bit of a challenge, just because the cost of air freight's nearly a third of what the hop costs, in places, and that starts to become a bit untenable. So we have a high cost of hop production anyway, so our hops aren't the cheapest that you can find out there in the global market. But the added cost of freight starts to make them really quite expensive. So it's rationalizing a bit of that and finding some middle ground so that customers can get a fair price and also get a high quality hop. We have actually probably focused just as much attention in that COVID season. The other benefit we've had from COVID is we really had an opportunity to look at our harvest windows, a whole bunch of optimization things that we could do on farm. So we spent a lot of time in the lead up to this 2021 harvest practicing for a harvest, in terms of, like, as Brent said earlier, that the harvest window shifting around and figuring out what needed to be grown and what didn't need to be grown. We've sort of been able to manage that and stagger that a wee bit. But yeah, in terms of sales impacts, it's been pretty significant. We didn't qualify last year for the grant, because I think you needed to be over 30% impacted, and I think we were 28.9% impacted. So we gave back the grant money to the government, and really we've been sort of reliant on our distributors globally to sort of keep channels open, make sure those brewers who are able to brew, especially in package, have hop supply, but has been a real about face for us in terms of looking at the varieties that we grow and saying, well, COVID's impacted a lot of the varieties that were not in core range beers. So how many of those hops do we need to grow in the following seasons? You know, we just don't really know.
It's a really tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them were sold out, you know, and we couldn't grow enough of them. And now all of a sudden the market sort of got enough because places aren't open. So we're rationalizing a little bit of that in terms of the growing side so that we can pull some and plant others. So it's a bit of optimization going on.
I think the great thing from a brewing point of view, though, is that some of these varieties that you haven't been able to get hold of before as brewers are now becoming more available. Nelson Sauvignon has always been one we've struggled to get enough of for our customers in Europe, and now that they're more readily available. So the message to anybody out there who's looking at brewing is these varieties now are ready to go, and you can have a go with them if you need to.
I think we had other varieties too that were gaining traction, you know, pre-COVID, and we were planting up to that traction, you know, with certain around the newer kind of varieties that probably haven't heard much of about brewers. And you know, us ourselves, we have sample beers sent from us, and we go, my goodness, this is a great beer. You know, we really need to get these hops out because, you know, people haven't had the ability to try them. They're less reluctant to put in a reasonable order. So
I think the other thing as well is we really haven't had major supply challenges. So what you said is true. We have for a very long period of time, Nelson Sauvignon's been the little flagship hop that everybody's been chasing. But it was about 3-4 years ago when we took on 10 new growers. So what we got to a point with the existing grower group where we said there's not as much land, there's not enough land in the co-op, so we'll bring some in from other interested parties, and we did that really. So there hasn't really been major supply issues for most New Zealand varieties for about 3-4 years now. It started to level out, and supply's been pretty good. There are shortages for some of the newer ones that we're busy commercializing. So Nectaron's the big one that everybody's hearing rave reviews about at the moment, and we're heavily scaling that up just as quickly as we can to meet sort of demand. We sold out this season. You guys will be getting a small amount of that crop this season, but we'll have a lot more coming on board next year. So that transition towards what the market's looking for now is our focal point. But we don't want to pull hops that we're not sure that there might be demand for. So it's a chicken and the egg. You got to make some bold moves about things. We're doing that with Nectaron, and we've got some other really cool trials that are coming through that we think will be pretty successful. So we'll just sort of ride the wave as it is, and see where we land.
We've still got to remember, Paul, we are an island nation in the arse end of the world, really. You know, we're 4,000 kilometres from Australia, and
thank God.
It has been great to hold a pandemic and a disease out, but as businesses start to look for, especially export, we're very much an exporting nation, and if we're not getting those ships coming into our country because they're busy in other countries, because they're flat out with all online orders, because someone wants to get a cell phone case for their cover for their phone or things like that, they're more likely to divert.
It's a very specific example. I feel like you've been gypped on a shipment from China.
but you know, they're more likely to stay within their territory than they are to venture down. And we've had a few shipping lines that have cancelled into New Zealand because we're simply down that part of the world.
We're too small to call into occasionally. So there's a lot of port emissions which have been a bit of a challenge for us. But
I know we've been talking
working it out.
Yeah, we've been talking to Christine, and she's been apologising. We've had a booking, and now it's been cancelled, and now we've got another one. And it's been quite a challenge for you guys to get the containers booked.
Well, we're at the point now where we're shipping out of any port in New Zealand. So typically we'd ship your stock out of Nelson and no dramas, and then now we're shipping out of Littleton because that one's getting a vessel landing in it. So it's just being a bit creative and proactive about how you get them out, but it's happening. I think the major thing with bookings is sort of getting them in advance, but we're trying to align that with our production schedule. So we're trying to sort of make sure the boat lands at the time that the next container can go. So it's just a logistical challenge.
I've got to hand it to the guys here. You know, the production schedule from this side of things with the palletizing and everything like that has been brilliant. It's by far been the best year we've had in terms of getting volume and stuff done. It's just if we had the containers lining up at the door, people would be brewing with them right now. But it's
we made a lot of that was the beauty, I guess, for us of COVID is a bit of a gap year to look at everything. So we redid the health and safety program, made sure we were up to speed with all the new conditions. But following that, we said, how can we process faster? So we moved from a 5-day, we knew all of this was coming basically. So we moved from a 5-day processing week on limited, normal working hours to a 7-day processing a week on rotational 10-hour shifts. So we're cranking the hops out way faster than we ever have. And that's been great. So certainly no issues there. It's just making sure you can get a booking with the local sea freight provider and getting it out to places.
It's quite a fine line, isn't it? Getting the product in, getting them processed, and then getting them moved out, and not overpopulating the stores too quickly. Getting everything moving nicely is a very skilled art, really.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a peak to it, but that's a fun challenge. That's why we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, just looking forward, obviously, as we were saying just before the meeting started, it's only a few weeks, and you guys will start working. And as the winter comes around and goes, and the spring becomes summer, you are looking forward to the next season. What sort of things are you expecting? Obviously, problems with labour by the sounds of things, but fingers crossed that that'll be solved. Anything else on the horizon that we should know about?
Other than some sort of ongoing trial work that we've still got for some of the advanced hops, our main agenda, I guess, is a bit of a reset. So trying to work out what brewers, especially in the UK, some of our other markets like the US, are a lot more buoyant. You can say that they just have the ability state by state to be open, and Australia is pretty much an open playing field. So I think in terms of our long-term changes for next season, it's really about reassessing what the European and the British market needs from New Zealand hops. What are the varieties that those brewers are seeking most, and then also working to sort of educate on some lesser-known varieties. Much like yourselves, there's a lot of varieties out there, a good range of them. It's all about the education for the use of those hops. So doing a little bit more of that, working in a bit closer with the brewers on that, and then making some final decisions on what to adjust finally. We grow 18 of our own varieties here, 4 foreign varieties, a bit of Fuggle, a bit of Chinook, and another 5 as organic. So for us, we're looking at the older hop varieties, at what we call our heirloom hop varieties, and saying the ones that are in a strong position contractually and have agreements for growing will continue to grow, and the other ones that don't have strong positions we can take out, because we are really trying to move into some of the new varieties that we've got waiting in the wings, that are just waiting for a little bit of land to plant on. So that's really the innovation piece that we're most excited about for next season.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. I think that the interesting thing here now is we've got a lot of brewers who are saying to us, "Oh, I don't need to contract. There's going to be loads of hops around. Why do I need to contract?" And specifically, if you're looking for something that you've been using for a long time, that's an older variety, or even some of the new varieties, you've got to sort of make sure that your contracts are in place, because if they're not, these hops might be moved out, sold to somebody else, or not grown at all, isn't it? It's important to get those contracts in. I think is the message.
It's a very good point, Paul, because we've got at this time of year over here, we are sitting down with the likes of George and our marketing team and going, righto guys, because we're not looking for 2022, we're looking for 2023. So for our propagation systems, we start this year, do our small, cuttings, and then we grow them on the following year, and it's the following spring that we plant them. So we're crystal balling quite a bit, and we're saying, okay, we've got a great variety here, an older heirloom variety here, which we're happy to grow on our farms, are now getting 20, 25 years old. Do we keep them in? Should we be pulling them out, putting in the newer varieties and things like that? So if we don't get that feedback from brewers saying this is going to be in my beer for the next 3 to 5 years of these older varieties, unfortunately, they're going to get removed and not put back into the system again. So we need the most feedback we can get from brewers is the most important thing, because we don't want to see anyone go out, and we love our old heirloom varieties. It's just because it's older doesn't mean, the whole beauty about craft beer and the brewing industry is I've pulled some of these varieties that you would have passed off as a generic variety back 15, 20 years ago, and you drink a beer of it and you're like, oh, what? This is in this can? And you're like, wow, they've created an own art around what they do with hops. And And just because it's old, just like yourself, Paul, it doesn't matter. You're still not a bad egg. You're not a rotten one.
There's still life in the old dog, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, it's the ultimate communication tool. Brewers sometimes have a slanted sort of eye to contracts because they think, oh, I don't want to get long, I don't, and they have a very uncertain future ahead of them. So we can totally appreciate that from their point of view. From our point of view, contracts are that communication tool and a way of voting with your feet. So we've had a number of brewers, especially in some of the Pacific Islands and different places, who they don't necessarily want some of the new innovation series coming off. They absolutely love Wakatu and Dr. Rudy and Green Bullet, and they have them in lagers, and that's the only hop they have in that lager. And they've come to us this year and said, oh, look, can we get bits and pieces of, just order it on spot again? And we've had to say, look, we're down to contracts on those as far as what we grow. We have no insight or perspective into the future, so therefore we don't grow it. And when you get better opportunities to grow other things that are more confirmed, you'll gravitate towards that. So I always tell brewers, you guys are the ones who can ultimately pick the future for the varieties that you want to use. Contracts are your way of doing that. So we've had brewers here contract out 3 years into some of the smaller varieties that we grow, just to make sure it's impossible for us to pull it out. So things like New Zealand Chinook, which is not obviously our own variety, but in order to prevent it from coming out of the ground, because we only grow about 2,000 kilos a year, the brewer said absolutely not, because a chance conversation led to me saying, oh no, it's coming out, we can't grow so many of them and it's pretty small. And absolutely not. How many years does it require? Blah blah blah, done. And they're very happy with the whole process. So contracts are really that communication tool, and we've been very flexible with our customers on contracts, so that when they do get long, we mostly work with them as long as we can see that they've really stumbled upon hard times and it's not something they've done through their own lack of procurement planning. So it's really the best way to plan this industry. Otherwise, the other thing we have as well is market competition. So a lot of brewers say, oh, well, look, this demand is subdued, so there should be a lot of spot hops, so I just won't bother with a contract. There's just no need for me, or I'm too small. I hear that more than anything, is I'm too small. And I always say to the brewer, but do you have any like core range beer? Oh yeah, we've definitely got beers that we need those hops for. And I say, well, you don't know what's happening if you haven't even got a contract, and you can't plan that supply. So even some of the smallest breweries who say I'm too small end up in that negative position of going, oh crap, I've got to reformulate this recipe now because I've been shorted. So Rewalker was a classic for us this year, with many breweries they know to contract. It's very hard to grow. Get a contract, be safe about because the co-op does a fantastic job of protecting it. That's why we band together. We very, very rarely run short on things that we intend to grow, and we have surplus usually to cover it. But with that hail event, we lost a little bit of that. We were hoping for about a 4-ton surplus of Rewalker. It didn't come, and then 15 phone calls in January. Oh, can I get a contract for? And it's like, I can't help you now. If you'd done it earlier, growers could have planted more, and then we would have been in a better position. So the lack of contracts is a real barrier to a hop farmer's growth for varieties. It really gives them a lack of confidence in a variety. And unfortunately, in many cases, they could probably sell that whole amount on the spot market, but it's just that inkling in the back of their mind that says, well, nobody's contracted for it, so maybe it's not in demand. And this is the conversation I have to have daily with growers like Brent and others, is to say, don't pull it out. We're still selling it through, and all the rest of it. It's just where the market is. So I guess there's a fine balance to be had there for brewers and suppliers.
And brewers and marketers have to realise on the farm scale of things, we're doing things to match harvest windows and hop training windows and things like that. It's not necessarily, well, that's going to be my best price per hectare hop, so let's put half the farm in that. Between our two farms, we're growing 19 varieties. And in that time, we've got harvest windows that are bouncing around all over the place, which is great because we can hone in on their optimums, which means the brewers are going to get their best possible harvest window to fit in there. Now, there's probably 5 or 6 varieties in there that, they cover their costs, but they don't do a great deal more, but they're fun to grow and we enjoy them, and they ease of use or something, and they fit a day's sort of harvest on that day where you might not have anything else. But if we don't know that it's still needed out there, then we'll pull it out and manage another variety into it. So.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good message to to end on. I mean, I think we've had the same issues over here. Our growers are very much having that conversation with lots of brewers now. We're having those conversations, same as you, George, same conversations.
Yeah.
The message is, please make sure you do get contracts in, because it is so important from a growing point of view to know what to grow for the brewery going forward, especially if you've got recipes that are so reliant on certain varieties, even more so important then. Look, guys, I really appreciate you getting up early to come and join me. A lot of people won't know, but this is Mark 2 of our conversation, because the first one didn't get recorded properly on Zoom. So again, double thank you for coming and joining us. And I hope that everybody's enjoyed our catch up. It's certainly put a lot of points into my head and a lot of ideas going forward as well, and given us a whole background of what is going on down in New Zealand. So I really appreciate that. And I hope we can catch up again later in the season, and when there's no hailstorms, Brent, and you won't be out in the field recording stuff like that, hopefully, and we can get an update on the crop there as well. So thank you for joining us, and thanks to everybody for joining us with this catch up. And if you're interested, we'll be doing some more of these in the next few weeks. So please tune in and listen to our excellent guests talk about hops. Thanks very much, everybody. And thanks, guys, again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.